We're working to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching ASEAN in Focus on today's headlines. Maintaining the stability of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations and expanding the role of the regional bloc in international geopolitics were among the highlights of the diplomatic talks of President Bongbong Marcos Jr. with Indonesian President Joko Widodo. U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate John Kerry met with Vietnam's Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh in Hanoi during his visit to the Southeast Asian nation, and both sides have discussed bilateral relations as well as cooperation in tackling climate change. A crashed Ferrari, a dead policeman, and a fugitive heir to a multi-billion-dollar fortune. 10 years on, Thailand is no closer to resolving one of its most notorious hit-and-run cases. And Singapore's 2 adult pandas will stay in the city-state after their zoo signed an agreement with Chinese authorities to extend their 10-year loan. First in our news, Philippine President Bongbong Marcos Jr. met his Indonesian counterpart, Joko Widodo, at the latter's presidential palace in Marcos's first ever state venture abroad, with both leaders pledging to strengthen defense and security cooperation. Both also agreed to further strengthen bilateral relations as well as work towards highlighting the role of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations to promote peace in the region. Let's take a look.
As is proper for the times that we face today, our discussions began as a recognition of the long relationship that the Philippines and Indonesia have had. So long that in 2 years' time, we are celebrating the 75th year of our diplomatic relations, although our relations go much further than that, because we consider Indonesians not only a neighbor, not only a friend, but kin. And for that, and on that basis, we spoke about the difficulties that we as members of ASEAN face after the pandemic. And this is why trade is such an important part of what we spoke and what we have agreed upon in today's discussions. We continue to thank Indonesia for the assistances and their involvement in the infrastructure programs of my predecessor, President Duterte, and their continuing commitment not only to go on and with these programs, but to increase the volume and the closeness between our two countries. We also spoke at length about the role that we believe ASEAN should play while we face the difficulties in this very volatile time in geopolitics, not only in our region, but also in the rest of the world. And we agreed that ASEAN is going to be the lead agent in the changes that we would like to see in continuing to bring peace to our countries. In actual fact, our discussions progressed so rapidly that we, the President and I, have agreed to organize task forces already to meet and discuss, even at the technical level, no longer at the political or the diplomatic level, but at the technical level, so as to be able to take a full advantage of the opportunities that we feel that are available to us and that we will need to exploit to succeed in the near future. I expressed my belief to President Widodo that this partnership between Indonesia, between Indonesia and the Philippines, but these partnerships that we make with all our partners and allies and friends around the world will be of critical importance so that we remain stable as we grow out of the pandemic economy. And we work together and help each other to develop regional peace and regional development.
Keempat, di bidang pertahanan dan keamanan, kita mendorong penguatan kerjasama untuk keselamatan dan keamanan perairan di wilayah perbatasan. Saya sangat menghargai telah dilakukannya penandatanganan Agreement on Cooperative Activities in the Field of Defense and Security. Saya senang kita telah memperbarui Trilateral Cooperative Arrangement TCA antara Indonesia, Filipina, dan Malaysia karena sangat penting dalam mengamankan jalur perairan dari ancaman penyanderaan dan penculikan.
President Marcos and President Widodo also renewed the Trilateral Cooperative Arrangement, or TCA, between Indonesia, the Philippines, and Malaysia, which is very important to secure the waters from threats of hostage-taking and kidnapping. President Widodo, meanwhile, said on regional cooperation, they discussed how to strengthen ASEAN and the implementation of the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific. President Marcos said he appreciated the discussions with President Widodo. President Marcos also thanked Indonesia for its assistance and involvement in the infrastructure programs of his predecessor, former President Duterte. He also thanked President Widodo for Indonesia's continuing commitment not only to go on and with these programs, but to increase the volume, as he said earlier, the closeness between the two countries. In other news, the UN's Myanmar Special Envoy vowed not to visit the country again unless she's allowed to meet ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi after a heavily criticized trip to meet the junta. UN Special Envoy Noelise Heiser said, "If I ever visit Myanmar again, it'll only be if I can meet with Aung San Suu Kyi." She told a seminar at the Singapore-based think tank, the IC's Yusof Ishak Institute, using a Burmese honorific for Suu Kyi. Heiser added that there was no clear path out of Myanmar's crisis and warned of a multidimensional catastrophe if the international community failed to broker efforts towards the peace in the country. Diplomatic efforts to resolve Myanmar's bloody impasse led by the UN and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations regional bloc have made little headway, with the generals refusing to engage with opponents. Heiser met with senior junta leaders in the capital last month during her visit 10 months after her appointment. The trip drew criticism from both the junta and the military's opponents. She was denied access to detained democracy figurehead Suu Kyi. The UN envoy later irked junta officials who accused her of issuing a one-sided statement of what had been discussed. Heiser had called for an immediate end to violence and the release of all political prisoners, according to her office at that time. Days after Heiser's visit, dozens of Myanmar civil society groups dismissed her trip as the latest evidence of the historical ineffectualness of UN envoys and criticized her meeting with junta chief Min Aung Hlaing. They also called for her mandate to be terminated and for UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres to intervene personally in this crisis. Cambodian Foreign Minister and ASEAN envoy for Myanmar, Prak Sokhonn, had visited Myanmar twice, but both times the military has denied him visits with Suu Kyi. In tonight's other news, Typhoon Hinnanmor made its way back out to sea on Tuesday morning after slamming South Korea with heavy rains and winds overnight. Typhoon Hinnanmor made landfall in South Korea early Tuesday, causing power outages and leaving one person missing, but with few early reports of major damage as it headed back to sea. The typhoon, one of the most powerful to bear down on the country in decades, hit the country's southern island of Jeju overnight before making landfall near the port city of Busan, which was battered by huge waters, huge waves, and heavy rain, and it damaged beachfront roads and shops. The typhoon was moving at a speed of 43 meters per second when it made landfall, according to authorities. A 25-year-old man went missing after falling into a rain-swollen stream in the eastern coastal city of Ulsan, the Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasures Headquarters said. As a precaution, authorities closed more than 600 schools nationwide, and local carriers grounded some 250 domestic flights, but service gradually resumed. On Tuesday, ASEAN and more headed towards Japan. North Korea had also been bracing for the storm, with leader Kim Jong-un overseeing a meeting in Pyongyang to assess the country's disaster response preparedness, according to official state media. Experts say North Korea is particularly vulnerable to flooding and heavy rains due to devastation and poor irrigation. And rescuers are scouring through rubble for hundreds of people missing in parts of southwestern China today after an earthquake killed more than 60. Local weather services are also warning of rain set to inundate the area. The magnitude 6.6 quake hit about 43 kilometers southeast of the city of Kangding in Sichuan province at a depth of 10 kilometers on Monday, according to the U.S. Geological Survey. Video from state broadcaster CCTV showed firefighters pulling a bruised and bloodied woman from the rubble and then carrying a survivor on a stretcher across the river on a makeshift bridge, as well as damaged buildings and streets strewn with fallen masonry. And footage also shared by the China Earthquake Network Center showed boulders thundering down mountainsides in Luding County, kicking up clouds of dust as the tremors swayed roadside telephone wires. At least one town suffered severe damage from landslides triggered by the quake. At least 65 people were killed. That is according to state media reporting this on Tuesday morning, with more than 200 still trapped in a remote scenic area and scores missing elsewhere. China's cabinet last night said it has dispatched a special team to lead the efforts, with CCTV reporting more than 6,500 people had been sent to emergency rescue. And President Xi Jinping called for local authorities to make saving lives the first priority, go all out to rescue people in disaster-stricken areas and minimize loss of life, according to CCTV. U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate John Kerry met with Vietnam's Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh in Hanoi during his visit to the Southeast Asian nation. Take a look.
Chúng tôi đánh giá cao cái nỗ lực của Hoa Kỳ, nỗ lực của Tổng thống Joe Biden, nỗ lực của ngài John Kerry trong cái việc tìm kiếm các cái giải pháp để chúng ta kiềm chế cái sự nóng lên của trái đất, rồi cái chống biến đổi khí hậu, và đặc biệt là cái chuyển đổi năng lượng. Và trong đó tôi đánh giá rất cao phía Hoa Kỳ đã kêu gọi các nước, trong đó có Hoa Kỳ, các nước EU, các nước phát triển cùng với chúng tôi để mà thực hiện cái cam kết tại COP26.
Now, both sides have discussed bilateral relations as well as cooperation in tackling climate change. Kerry affirmed the U.S. consistently attaches importance to the comprehensive partnership with Vietnam and backs the Southeast Asian country to play an active and substantial role in the region and on global issues, including climate change. The U.S. remains committed to cooperation with and support for developing countries in climate change, adaptation, clean energy, and sustainable infrastructure development and smart water resource management, according to Kerry. According to the State Department, Kerry's trip has been seen as an opportunity to engage in discussion on climate cooperation ahead of the COP27, which will be hosted in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, in November. Before Vietnam, Mr. Kerry also traveled to Bali, Indonesia, to attend the G20 Climate and Environmental Ministerial meeting. A crashed Ferrari, a dead policeman, and a fugitive heir to a multi-billion-dollar fortune. 10 years on, Thailand is no closer to resolving one of its most notorious hit-and-run cases. Vora Youth boss Yuvidya, princeling of the Red Bull energy drink family, is accused of plowing his sports car into police officer Wichian Glenn Pressert's motorbike in Bangkok's wealthiest neighborhood a decade ago on Saturday. Now, within hours of the crash, investigators followed a trail of brake fluid to the Yuvidya family's Bangkok compound, where they found a badly dented vehicle with a smashed windscreen. Police initially accepted a claim that an employee was driving, but Vorayuth became the main suspect, and his family later paid the victim's relatives $100,000 compensation, according to the BBC and New York Times. Now, for 5 years, Vorayuth played a game of cat and mouse, ducking court summonses, claiming through lawyers he was overseas on business or ill, while photographs documented a globe-trotting lifestyle, living it up in London, attending Red Bull racing events, or going off on beach holidays and ski trips. Charges of speeding, drunk driving, and failing to render assistance expired before a Bangkok court belatedly issued an arrest warrant in 2017. By then, Vorayuth had already fled. In 2020, the Thai authorities dropped all charges against Vorayuth, triggering a huge public outcry, including a social media campaign to #boycott Red Bull. Last month, a charge of using cocaine expired. Thailand's Attorney General's office said, leaving only one avenue for prosecutors to pursue against Vorayuth: reckless driving causing death, which carries a maximum 10-year prison term. The AG's office told AFP that the charge is valid until 2027. Few, however, expect Vorayuth to face the courts. As the grandson of Red Bull co-founder Chileo Yuvidya, who died in 2012, Vorayuth is part of a clan with an estimated net worth of $26.4 billion, making it Thailand's second richest family, according to Forbes. Taiwan said a Chinese military reconnaissance drone entered its air defense zone, the latest incursion as relations between the two neighbors remain tense. The drone, identified by Taipei's defense ministry as a BZK 007 vehicle, crossed into the southwest corner of the island's Air Defense Identification Zone, or ADIZ, along with 8 Chinese warplanes. In contrast, the BZK 007 is a much larger military drone built by the Guizhou Aircraft Industry Corporation that can carry out long-distance flights and boasts much more sophisticated reconnaissance devices. Taiwan's ADIZ is much larger than its airspace, and it overlaps with part of China's ADIZ and even includes some of the mainland. Monday's incursion came after Taiwanese soldiers on a tiny islet just off China's mainland shot down an unidentified commercial drone last week. That was the first time Taiwanese forces have downed a drone following a sudden spate of incursions by small, commercially available drones in recent weeks. Taiwan's 23 million people live under constant threat of invasion by China, which claims the self-ruled democratic island is part of its territory to be taken one day by force if necessary. The news continues here on ASEAN in Focus. We'll be back. Welcome back. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson formally tendered his resignation to Queen Elizabeth today, handing over power to Liz Truss after his momentous tenure dominated by Brexit and COVID was cut short by a scandal. First, let's listen in.
I will deliver a bold plan to cut taxes and grow our economy. I will deliver on the energy crisis, dealing with people's energy bills, but also dealing with the long-term issues we have on energy supply.
She's certainly facing a very difficult in-tray, as people say. Some would say a perfect storm. The economy looks like it's heading into recession. People are very worried about their gas and electricity bills in particular, but also food bills are a problem for many people. So forcing the choice between heating and eating, some people would suggest. She's going to have to come up with something very quickly on that, probably this week. She is also in the slightly longer term, but she doesn't have much time, going to have to do something about the state of the National Health Service, because it's really creaking under the strain of the COVID backlog and indeed staff shortages. Some people are even forecasting inflation going up to somewhere near 20% next year. So we could have this dire stagflation situation, which is never good for governments. You only have to look back to the 1970s to see what a problem that can be for any prime minister. So Liz Truss and the economy, it may not be a particularly happy marriage. From what she has said during the leadership contest, one might expect her to carry out some kind of neoliberal experiment on the British economy, cutting taxes, downsizing the state, reducing regulation. I suspect, though, that that was candidate Truss. We might see a little bit of that from PM Truss, but I suspect that she will pivot to a slightly more pragmatic and some would say sensible policy. Having said that, it looks as if her intention is to let borrowing take the strain. So she will still go ahead with those tax cuts, but not worry too much about how that affects the public finances, at least in the short term. There won't be any change on Ukraine. It's very clearly in Britain's national interest to ensure that we try to keep Russia at bay. She's perhaps even more hawkish than Johnson on China, so we may see a slight difference of tone there, but otherwise not very much discontinuity on foreign policy. The question for Truss will be whether she can carry on this conflict with the EU over Northern Ireland and still maintain a friendship, the so-called special relationship with the USA.
As Foreign Secretary, Truss spearheaded a raft of trade deals following the UK's divorce from the European Union. Truss has branded her initial opposition to Brexit a mistake, despite growing evidence of its economic cause, and has repositioned herself as a champion of the cause. On the international stage, she has also forcefully confronted Russia's invasion of Ukraine. According to the Diplomat website, Liz Truss, the UK's new Prime Minister, loves the Indo-Pacific, and that's what her many visits, photo ops, and speeches within the region would suggest. Having served as the UK's Foreign Secretary from September 2021 until last week and previously International Trade Secretary, Truss arrives at Downing Street with an international resume. Now that she is in the driver's seat, Truss will need to show that she can provide more than visits and slogans to make the UK a worthy partner in the Indo-Pacific, according to the Diplomat website. Asian investors are struggling today to recover from the previous day's losses on growing fears over Europe's worsening energy crisis, China's economic slowdown, and central bank efforts to contain surging inflation. However, the dollar lost some of its momentum against its major peers on profit-taking, with the euro finding some support ahead of unexpected European Central Bank interest rate hike and sterling lifted by the election of a new prime minister. Russia's decision not to resume gas supplies to Europe and retaliation for sanctions over Ukraine all sent shockwaves through trading floors on Monday as it ramped up expectations of a painful recession in major economies. With Wall Street closed for a holiday, Asia had few new catalysts to drive buying. In early trade, markets fluctuated between gains and losses, with Hong Kong, Seoul, and Wellington down, while Shanghai, Sydney, Singapore, Taipei, and Jakarta edged up. Tokyo and Manila were flat. The newly acquired fast attack interdiction craft missiles, or FAICMs, will boost the Philippine Navy's capability to protect the country's littoral zones. The littoral, or near shore, is the part of a sea, lake, or river that is close to the shore. Now, these ships could be deployed to patrol and protect our littorals from any possible threats, according to Philippine Navy spokesperson Commander Benjo Negranza in an interview with the Philippine news agency today. Other possible missions of these ships will be determined by the leadership of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. The BRP Nestor Acero, or PG-901, and BRP Lolinato Ong PG-902 which were formerly christened in rights at the Philippine Navy headquarters in Manila, are the first 2 out of the 9 FAICs MSMs acquired by the Philippines from Israel Shipyards Limited for 10 billion pesos. Now, these vessels are named after 2 Philippine Marine Corps heroes and Medal of Valor recipients, the late Private First Class Nestor Acero and the late First Class Lieutenant Lolinato Toong. The Indian Minister of State for External Affairs and Education, Dr. Rajkumar Rajnan Singh, and the Secretary General of ASEAN, Datu Lim Jock Hoi, jointly inaugurated the ASEAN-India Network of Universities on August 29. AINU or AINU is aimed at twinning universities in India and ASEAN under common areas of interest through faculty exchange programs. First, let's listen in.
Enhancing our people's linkages and mobility are critical in helping us address regional and global challenges and also appreciate the culture, history, and value of our relationships. I'm pleased that the ASEAN-India Network of Universities will provide a platform to our people to collaborate on research and innovation. Moreover, the network will not only contribute to the ASEAN Work Plan on Education 2021-2025, but also to various cross-sectoral initiatives, including Master Plan of ASEAN Connectivity 2025, the ASEAN Declaration of Human Resources Development for the Changing World of Work, as well as the ASEAN Digital Master Plan and ASEAN Plan of Action for Digital Agreements.
In his remarks, Dr. Singh meanwhile shared the highlights of India's new education policy and its relevance in forging collaboration between educational institutions in India and ASEAN. The Deputy Secretaries General of ASEAN, permanent representatives of the ASEAN member states to ASEAN, Vice Chancellor of the Nalanda University, and other dignitaries joined the launch event at the ASEAN Secretariat. Meanwhile, representatives of AINU's participating universities and the Executive Director of the ASEAN University Network attended the event online. The inauguration of AINU marks a significant milestone as ASEAN and India celebrate the year 2022 as ASEAN-India Friendship Year to commemorate 30 years of their relationship. The launch event was followed by the Minister Singh's interaction with the Committee of Permanent Representatives to ASEAN to further discuss ASEAN-India relations and exchange views on regional and global issues of mutual unrest. Finally, in our news, Singapore's 2 adult pandas will stay in the city-state after their zoo signed an agreement with Chinese authorities to extend their 10-year loan. Let's take a look.
This extension agreement will enable NWG and CWCA to deepen their meaningful work on giant panda conservation and is testament to the long-standing friendship between Singapore and China.
If the family, stays together, I think it will be quite sad if to see that the baby is going to go back, the parents are still staying here. Especially at a young age, as a mom myself, I think it's good to see that the kid actually stay with the mom for a longer period.
I think it's great because it's still a value to our country and also attract a lot of tourist attraction?
I think it's really a very great news for Singaporeans or for visitors to Singapore to know that the pandas are going to stay in Singapore for another 5 years. We can get to see them more often, and the kids can actually get to see them.
Thank you for joining us here on ASEAN in Focus. I'm Alma Angeles. Stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.